Hello there, and in this video, well, it's just a vlog basically. It's just a man sat in front of a car talking. Not really a video format I can imagine that goes that far, but anyway, purpose of today's video is to talk to you about VEP, my 1984 registered, 1983 year built. Yes, I've said that to keep somebody happy. I'll leave you to imagine who that is. Mark 1 Citroen BX, which I recently took over to Wales. I took VEP to Wheels for Wales, in fact. Snuck on the end of the Whiteland restoration stand and had a rather thoroughly nice time over there. So if you're not familiar with Wheels for Wales, it's an event that's been organised by Emily Bell and Owain James, and they're raising money for the Welsh Air Ambulance. It came about because back in May 2021, Emily's father was involved in a head-on collision, and he was airlifted to Cardiff Hospital by the Welsh Air Ambulance that basically saved his life. And they decided that they wanted to do something and sort of give something back. So they organised their first car run back in 2023, and this is now the second show that they've put on in Newquay. They raised over £8,000 on the day for the Welsh Air Ambulance, and I think that now takes them to 15,000 overall. So it was a real pleasure to be able to go along and sort of show my support that day. What I will do is I'll include a link, by the way, both to the show coverage that I did on the day and a few photos. You can sort of see both photos of a few cars and of all the events team. And this is the other thing I want to say is a big thank you to everybody who was involved in planning that event, because it went really smoothly. They got everybody in and out really, really well, and it was just such a lovely day. You know, really, really nice atmosphere, fantastic mix of cars, great mix of people and characters, you know, a few people that I got to chat to on the day. And yeah, it was just really, really wonderful to go to. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about in this video was one of the things I did whilst I was over at Wheels for Wales is I drove my first ever BMW. Lewis and Leanne very kindly entrusted me with the duty of driving their E46 ClubSport from their workshop over to the showground for Wheels for Wales, and I'll tell you, it was no small responsibility considering the amount of work that they've recently put into that, and it was a hell of a drive, to be honest with you. I can very, very, very much understand and see the appeal of them, and Lewis has done an absolutely incredible job putting all that back together. It just honestly drove absolutely beautifully. But yeah, my first ever drive of a BMW. A little bit scary on some of the roads to and from the workshop because they are a bit sort of narrow and windy, but yeah, I loved every moment of it. And they've now had me looking in the classifieds, not necessarily for a ClubSport because they're obviously quite a bit rarer and a bit more expensive, but certainly you know, something like an E46 330 of some sort I'd certainly consider. The closest in terms of vehicles I've driven before was many, many, many years ago, and I was a much thinner, much younger man. I did have a Lexus IS200. That car, to be perfectly honest with you, could be a video in its own right because I managed to buy the world's only unreliable Lexus IS200. I can't remember the exact headline figure now, but I think there was somewhere in the region of around £12,000 worth of warranty repairs done on that car in the time I had it, which is, again, for an IS200, unheard of. They're very, very unusual. But me rambling on, that IS200 again had a straight 6, albeit only a 2 litre, and I do remember how sort of supremely smooth it was, how nice it sounded, and that sort of rifle bolt action gearbox. So it's obvious where they were sort of drawing from when they made the IS200. It was obviously drawing from the equivalent 3 Series at the time. So yeah, totally get the appeal of the E46, and well, Leanne's been laughing and going, come join us on the dark side. So maybe at some point, but at the moment I have far too many vehicles as it is. I'm already, I think, at the time of recording, up to 4, and some things need to move around quite rapidly. Speaking of vehicles moving around, so there are some changes hopefully coming to the fleet shortly. The V70 is going to get MOT'd and sold. I've already got somebody who's potentially interested in that. The same is then also likely to happen to the £500 XC90, and the reason the £500 XC90 is going to be moved on is because I've got another XC90 coming, but my folks are going to be moving on their 2.5T petrol auto Volvo XC90, and I think my mum was quite keen to keep it in the family. there are some bits and pieces I'll probably wind up doing to that. It needs a PCV doing to it, it's due another cam belt, gearbox service, probably some front suspension work, and I will also be putting a fair bit of time into the rear subframe on that because I want to have that all nicely rust-proofed and protected ahead of the winter. So yeah, there is a bit more still to come with a £500 XC90. I think I'll be putting this video out before, yes, it will go out before some of the other content that's coming, but basically since the last video I put out on it, I have changed all the engine mounts with some slightly headachy and painful results, but I say that's a two-parter with that. I have done a full gearbox service, which has cured the torque converter judder that I was having. I've done a basic service on it to see if I could track down a little bit of an issue with what I think is a sticking lifter or follower, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And I've also had one of the front brakes to bits to try and cure a little bit of creaking and groaning that's been going on. So yeah, there's a few bits happening to that. I still also need to change the cam belt. I've got the full kit to do that, and I've got a noisy wheel bearing that I need to deal with. The noisy wheel bearing, to be honest with you, I think I'm probably going to leave to a garage because ideally I need to get the whole car in the air and then figure out exactly which one it is and just replace the one that's gone. I suspect it's the near side front because that's what I call the roundabout tyre. You know, you throw a car in and that's the wheel that tends to get the most weight. But anyway, once all that's done, I think the £500 XC90 is going to get moved on to somebody else to enjoy. Now, whilst I was down in Wales, I stayed somewhere slightly unusual really. It's called a motel. I'll include a little clip now of the hotel room that I stayed in. Right, so now I've made it, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a tour of my hotel room. So I booked in at the motel just up the road from where the event's going to be tomorrow. It's quite unusually themed, shall we say. But I've got to say, I rather like it. I mean, the room's got air conditioning. You've got a private bathroom through here, which looks quite nice. It's nice and clean and tidy. So I have booked a family room because at the time that was the only one that was left. So I've got bunk beds. There's a nice TV on the wall as well. Yeah, there's a little bit of construction going on outside at the moment. I believe they are in the process of building a roundabout on the road there to make it a little bit safer. But I mean, nevertheless, it's still nice enough. Okay, it's a bit of a building site, but I've got hills, I've got cows, and yeah, it's very close to where Wheels to Wales is going to be, so it's hopefully going to be an ideal place to chill out and relax. Yeah, quite eclectic, very, very, very different. Didn't have the best night's sleep, unfortunately, the first night I was there due to some slightly noisy guests, but second night was a whole lot better. But yeah, like I say, just appreciated the uniqueness of the room, the layout. It's quite clever, really, all custom made. And yeah, if you're sort of interested in staying somewhere slightly unusual, I'd certainly recommend it. But this video is basically about what was it like driving a Mark 1 Citroen BX all the way over to Wales. And the honest truth is, it wasn't particularly dramatic, although I did have a little bit of trouble just before the trip. You know something, I'm really starting to think that Vep doesn't like me very much. I've just had a cursory glance underneath and well, it's fresh LHM, so let's have a look together and see if we can see where on earth it's coming from this time. Nope. Doesn't like starting when it's got direct sunlight on it. Nice PSA overrun noise on the starter motor. the level light's gone out. Oh, belt squeaking a bit. Right, let's pull it forward and see if we can get a better look at what's going on. So that's my fresh puddle of LHM down there, and it seems to be on the passenger side front. And there it is there, and whatever it is, it's not a little leak either, it's a good leak. Marvellous. Alright, so I've got a slightly better view of everything now, but wherever the leak is coming from, it's coming from down and around there. Alright, so it's either coming from that high pressure end there, although if it was, I'd expect it to be spilling out, as it seemed to be at the moment, or it's coming out of this low pressure bit here. But again, now I've cleaned everything out, mysteriously, there's no fresh LHM leak to be seen. I have just been giving everything a really good dousing down with brake clean, and then in a moment I'll fire everything back up once this is all dried back. Okay, so I've been running it now for a couple of minutes. I can't see any obvious leaks there at all. Neither on those two high pressure connections there, nor on that low pressure there. Certainly nothing that would account for the amount of LHM that I found, and I can't see anything flowing further down over the subframe either. I think what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to clean the driveway back up and the garage, park Vep back up in there and see if I have a fresh puddle up here. Come on Vep, you really do want to go to Wales, don't you? Right, so I've just been and had a better look. Now at where this leak is, and it looks like it's coming from, so the high pressure pipe that's closest to me. When I looked at it earlier, it's just typically it's gone now. See, there's a pool of LHM below there, look. And the pipe that was closest to me had got a drip on the bottom. So I'm assuming it's leaking from somewhere around there. Either it's the pipe itself or the connector. But I think that puts Wheels for Wales really in doubt, because I'm not going to drive this car if it's got any suspected leaks on the high pressure side. Right, so I have just spent some time painstakingly winding that on a few turns, and I think it's a fair bit further in now than it was before, to the point where I think I may have overdone it slightly, because you can see I've started to slightly round the bolt on that turn there. So I think it's in all the way. It certainly is in as good as I can get it with the access I've got. Getting a bloody spanner on that was a colossal pain in the bottom, at least sitting down here on the ground rather than having it up on ramps. So yeah, I've cleaned everything up underneath as best I can. So I think if I get any new pulls of LHM now, I'll know. So I'm going to fire it up in a moment, see what's what, see if it all spews out of there or not. Hopefully not. And then I'll just let it idle for a little bit so the system gets up to pressure, and then whack it back in the garage afterwards and see what it does. Because when it was leaking back, it wasn't leaking back earlier when it was running. It seemed to be after it was shut off. So it must have been a fairly slow leak, whatever it is. Right, so it's the following day. Having sort of just put a few turns on that union there. Like I say, I let it sit overnight, and the good news is that it looks like it's as dry as a bone in there. There's no leak anymore now on those pipes. So it does look like it was just that one there that just needed nipping up a tiny bit. So that's good. Hopefully that means we're sorted. Yeah, as you can see, that wasn't ideal. Thankfully, just nipping up that little 8mm connector on the back of the safety valve sorted everything out. But it was a bit of a worry just before the trip. So yeah, I've got to be honest with you. I was a little stressed before taking this car to Wales. and struggling to sleep over it. I think I had a night's sleep where I was basically dreaming about the entire hydraulic system and returns. And it's kind of silly in a way, because my own mind is perpetuating the very myth that I've often wanted to dispel about these, because people do have visions of them being, you know, I mean, they are complicated, but they're not hugely unreliable. I mean, chatting to Ian Hubnut at Wheels for Wales, he told me I think the only time he's ever had a high pressure failure in a BX was in a 300,000 mile Mark 1 that hadn't been particularly well looked after. In fact, I think I remember seeing that on his channel. I'll pop a picture up of it. I'm sure I've seen a picture of that Mark 1 BX on his channel. But, you know, other than that, he's had loads of BXs, and yes, they've all been a little bit wet underneath and had, you know, the odd little leak here and there. And obviously he's had, you know, other hydro-pneumatic Citroens as well. But yeah, it's something I need to push back. In my mind, this is a fragile car, and it's probably not. I mean, don't get me wrong, it probably is. It's a 40-year-old car. It needs to be treated with some respect and some care and some love, but equally it needs to be driven and enjoyed and experienced. And I think maybe at the moment I've still been sort of erring a little bit too much on the side of, you know, put it in a bubble and keep it in the garage and never really use it. Which isn't really the right way to have something like this. But yeah, it did cause me some worry, to be honest with you, to the point where the night before I was still flip-flopping between taking this or the XC60. I am very, very glad, though, that I did take this and I gave it an adventure, because I think it's pushed me past that to a certain degree. And like I say, I think the other thing is, particularly talking to Lewis and Leanne from Whiteland whilst I was there, you know, talking through sort of all the trials that Lewis has had with his E30, with Christina, and the fun and games they've had getting Monica right and up and running. Those sorts of thoughts and feelings and experiences, I think, are part of both project car ownership and classic car ownership. And it really isn't realistic to have something like this, a 40-year-old car, and expect not to have problems. You know, and at the end of the day, worst case scenario is I have good breakdown cover. I know the vehicles quite well. The reason I spotted that leak in the first place was because I was, you know, using a bit of due diligence and checking things over. I mean, you can take that too far with something like this, because to be honest with you, if I dug and dug and dug, I guarantee I would find something. You know, a weep or a small leak or whatever else, you know, something like that. Even on those modern things out there, you know, you dig far enough, you're always going to find something. And I think for me, the experience of going to Wales in it has really been about trying to find that boundary of not saying just sod it and ignore it and drive it, but trying to find that boundary and that sort of balance between my sort of need to make sure that this is as mechanically spot on and as safe as it can be, sort of balanced up with, like I say, trying to enjoy it and trying to use it and trying not to sort of, you know, mentally scan through the car from number plate to number plate before I go anywhere, anticipating every single last possible thing that may or may not go wrong with it. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster on any car, let alone something like this. I mean, and this in BX terms is pretty simple anyway. I think Kitch said, other than this, you know, I mean, your best way for the most basic BX experience, I think, is a 1.4 TU engined BX. I think is the simplest way to experience something like this. But like I say, one of these with a carb, it's still, you know, fairly straightforward. There's no ABS, fairly limited electronics to worry about, and apart from the interior pieces, you know, the dashboard and stuff being made from pure solid unobtainium, most things are pretty easy to get. I mean, this lump and the BE1 gearbox that's on it are shared in common with a lot of Peugeots. I mean, it's a Peugeot XU engine and gearbox. I mean, I looked the other day and I could quite easily get a rebuilt BE1 gearbox, you know, for a 205 GTI straight onto this, no bother at all. You know, so those drivetrain bits are available and still out there. And I think I just need to, I need to kind of continue where I've started and just to push myself to try and enjoy it a bit more. But yeah, having sorted that, I then cracked on and took it to Wales on the sort of Saturday morning daytime, drove through, and yeah, it just behaved really, really well. I did mostly stay off dual carriageways and motorways. I had to do a little bit of dual carriageway at the start. VEP, I would say, is not... It's not the best car above about 56 miles an hour, unfortunately. Getting up to about 3,000 RPM is where this sort of really quite significant buzzing and resonating starts. It's very strange, really, because below that it's incredibly smooth, and I think for a car of this age and era quite refined and quiet. But once you get much over 3,000 RPM, things get quite buzzy and quite noisy and quite uncomfortable. And obviously the faster you go, you know, up to sort of 70 or so, the worse it gets. To the point where what I wound up doing, I bought some, I think they were called Ring Experience earplugs. I think they're used by a lot of motorcyclists, and they allowed me to continue to be able to hear everything on the road and the instructions from my navigation driving there, but just took enough of that sort of top layer of sound out to make it a bit more bearable. Citroen BXs, I think, in general, were never known for their soundproofing, so I think at some point that is one improvement that I'm going to need to look at with VEP. Incidentally, when I mentioned this to Kitch about how buzzy and noisy I thought VEP was, he suggested it probably wouldn't be a good idea for me to drive a TVR. And I could probably agree with him. To be fair, I mean, even my modern stuff can push me a little bit. I do wonder whether I have a bit of hypercorsis going on, because I can struggle and get overwhelmed by sound quite easily. And like I say, these XU petrol engines were never known for their refinement. I think even if you go back and sort of read the reviews back in the day, once you get up to a certain RPM, they can get quite buzzy. But I think the best way that I can perhaps remedy that in the long term is with some additional sound deadening. But like I say, other than that, it just sort of trooped along really, really well. In fact, I'll include a little bit of a set of clips here, sped up slightly, of some of the more scenic driving on the way there. yeah, just a cracking day for it. Beautiful weather. The roads were fairly busy because, you know, Saturday in Wales when the weather's nice, but like I say, it shrugged everything off with relative ease, to be honest with you. I still do think I want one with power steering at some point. That's probably going to have to be retrofitted to this in some manner. I don't know, there will be a few people, a few purists who will go, boo, you know, it didn't have power steering, leave it alone. Yeah, quite frankly, anybody that moans about that can get stuffed. This is my car and I want to be able to enjoy it fully. The one thing I didn't, by the way, get to do whilst I had it over in Wales was get Ian to road test it. I had hoped to do that, but sort of timings and things haven't worked out. But I think based on how well VEP did going there on this trip, I wouldn't hesitate in taking VEP to Wales again. And this is the other thing that I didn't mention publicly to many people, but a few friends did know in private, was that Wheels for Wales trip in this was really going to be my make or break with this car. You know, I sort of hinted in the other video, it was a little bit clickbait, you know, have I fallen out with the BX, etc, etc. But I have struggled to bond with it a little bit. Part of that is because it was one of my halo cars. I mean, it is my halo car, really. This is where cars and my interest in cars started. Balancing that expectation with perhaps a slightly underdeveloped field of reference, because I haven't driven very many 80s and 90s cars in the last few years. It's just taken me a little bit of sort of adapting and getting used to. And I have struggled, if I'm honest, to really enjoy it. And even along a lot of the drive to Wales, I wouldn't say I was enjoying it particularly until I got on the A487 going out towards Newquay. And I think it's one of those roads where it's just the right speed for this car. It's below 60, it's sweeping. The suspension is dealing with all the undulations in an absolutely amazing way. I'm keeping the speed up so that the steering's reasonably nice and light. The brakes are so good, they're phenomenal. And everything in it just came together. And that really, you know, little moments like that are the ones where you can sort of begin to appreciate and sort of bond with and enjoy a car. But yeah, I think I'm starting to get there with it now, and it's certainly that little bit along the 487 put a big grin on my face. And I guess that's kind of the moment I'd been waiting for and I hadn't really had with it. I've had little sort of sparks of enjoyment out of driving it, but mostly it's been a lot of the time it has more been sort of either overwhelmed by the noise, overwhelmed by the heaviness of the steering, or a slight concern, a legitimate one to be perfectly honest with you, when you consider, I appreciate I'm a hypocrite here because I have probably 2+ ton SUVs sat on the driveway in front of me, but also a little bit of fear about, you know, other vehicles around you, because obviously what this is made out of in terms of its sort of construction is slightly more marginal, shall we say, than the other two vehicles I've currently got sat out on the driveway in front of me here that you can't see. So it is something you're mindful of when you are driving a vehicle like this. But yeah, I mean, it got through it fine. I had a few little phases where I was checking underneath for puddles, didn't have any LHM puddles, a little bit of engine oil, but I haven't, to be honest with you, I've never had an XU engine that hasn't, diesel or petrol, that hasn't sort of been incredibly wet underneath. And yeah, other than that, for the most part, all A-OK. So having said, yeah, we've sort of passed the acid test now. We've had an adventure with VEP and I'm happy, and I'm definitely going to keep VEP. What's next? Well, I need to investigate that 3000 RPM buzzing issue. I'm going to start by replacing all the plugs and probably doing a full ignition sort of service on it as well. I'll do the leads and the HT cap and everything else. I'm going to swap the fuel that it's running on. I have been running VEP on ordinary E10, and quite a few people have suggested to me that I really should be running VEP on V-Power. I'm also going to swap the engine mounts because they are, well, apart from the yoke one at the back, which I know Kitch did, I think the one that sits underneath the on the bulkhead that side and the one on the gearbox are the 40-year-old originals. They could be a bit stiff, which is what could be causing that pass-through and vibration. The other thing I'm going to do as a short-term measure to try and help with the noise is I have a load of Killmat sound deadening. So in a future video we will probably start, I think, with the boot floor, because it's got a very thin piece of carpet on it and otherwise no sound deadening whatsoever, and we'll get a load of sound deadening in there and just see if that helps. The next part after that, well, I need to start thinking about this vehicle's longer term cosmetics and restoration. I don't know how far I'm going to take it. I would love to say, you know, something, I'm going to bare metal it, but I think realistically that would probably be, I bet it would be upwards of 20 or 30 grand to have it bare metaled, and I don't think that's going to be realistic for me in the sort of even in the medium term. But I would like to go and do some panel shopping. I want to get 4 doors. I've got 2 rear doors already actually, which aren't too bad, that Mike Vanny gave me, but ideally I need 4 rust-free doors all round. I need a new rear quarter panel on that side, and the sort of underlying metal bracket that secures it to the rear bulkhead so that that's all secure. It needs some tidying up and welding around the tailgate, a repair on the A-pillar down there by the front of the windscreen because that's started to go, and we need to lift the 2 plastic caps off either side and see what horrors are lurking underneath on the roofline there. So although there's nothing needed structurally welding wise, I think Kitch dealt with most of that. He put a new sort of front end on it, he redid the subframe and various bits and pieces. There's going to be quite a bit of cosmetic welding and bits and pieces to do over time. Ultimately, I would like to have the whole car repainted, probably in a modern red, still in Venetian red, but probably with a 2K clear coat system on it so that it doesn't fade in the sun like it does at the moment. And then with these bumpers, I'll either have them painted, because I mean they've already started to fade again even after all that time I put into sort of scrubbing them and trying to clean them up. I probably will either have them vinyl wrapped with a textured vinyl in this sort of colour so that we sort of keep that plastic look, or I'll have them painted. I quite like the idea of vinyl wrapping them, to be honest with you, because that way if it does ever pick up a knock or a scrape, I can just have the bumpers rewrapped if I have a bit of spare material left over. I need to do something about the headlights. Again, I mean, they're not as bad as they are on, say, a Citroen XM, but they were never a strong point on these cars. I have got some Osram Nightbreaker bulbs to go in there, but I think, to be honest with you, the actual silvering in the headlight units themselves is degraded, so it would be nice to keep these as original, send them away and have them sort of re-silvered, and hopefully that will help. I think there is also a modification I can do on the actual light switch system itself that helps prevent overloading the sort of like the main switch on the dashboard with a series of relays, but I need to do a bit of research on that. The entire low pressure return system needs an overhaul because I have small leaks pretty much everywhere on the low pressure return system. I have a small patch which I've put, I think, from the height corrector at the front back up into the tank. There's a sort of a link or a join in there which is in just about the worst possible place that you can try and get your hands in. So one of the reasons I don't do the full sit aerobics in this, because I'm sort of convinced that if I do that and lower it down from high, it's going to wind up blowing that connector off again. So really I would like to replace all the low pressure system either with a proper reproduction system, which I think you can get from Chevronics, or, although again I think this would be controversial, having a go at making my own system out of silicon tubing and routing it in a place slightly more sensible than in a completely inaccessible point in the subframe. I think from what I've read, a lot of people recommend removing the drive shafts to change the low pressure return system. I think the life on them typically on BXs is every 15 years, and as far as I know, again the octopus on this is the 40-year-old original. So there's no surprise really that there's a few little leaks here and there, but it's nothing catastrophic. I mean, I haven't had to top up the LHM in this for over a year, even with all the little leaks, and that little one you just saw, that they're built with a lot of excess capacity in mind. I want to give this engine bay a really good clean down because it's absolutely filthy in places, and then yeah, the rest of it is just trying to pretty it and tidy it up and make it look a little bit more sort of presentable. I know a few people have said, have almost begged me not to over restore it, and I sort of appreciate where they're coming from with that, but I want this to be the best Mark 1 BX it can possibly be, at least within my means and finances and budget. The other thing I have got for it, and I don't know whether I'm going to do this or not now, I was originally dead set on it and changed my mind, his channel name's changed now. It was Adventures in Rust. I think it's Everything Must Rust. Or everything, is it Everything Must Rust or Everything Does Rust? I can't remember now. Chris Gould, I think his name is, gave me a set of Citroen BX alloy wheels last year. And they are very similar to, but not exactly like, the original 16 TRS alloys you could get. Now, I think the original 16 TRS alloys were metrics, and obviously I don't want metrics because I want to be able to fit tyres. But what I might do is see if I can have the fronts of them diamond cut back, so that they've got the same flush face as the originals, because again, those are the wheels I remember our BX having, and it would be quite nice to have them on this. It'll also give me a chance to change the tyres, because I'm not that happy with the Falcons that I've had fitted. I think they are a little bit too stiff to work with the whole Citroen suspension system. Certainly when you inflate them to 29 psi, which is the sticker pressure on the pillar on the inside of the door there. I think it rode better on the Michelins, if I'm honest with you, and I will probably look to swap to some form of slightly softer, slightly more compliant all-season tyre, you know, maybe a Cross Climate 2 or Goodyear Vector 4 Season Gen 3 or something like that. Something that's just a little bit squidgier, because I think that's really what you want with this sort of suspension setup. You don't want a hard tyre with soft suspension. Again, those on a little modern Super Mini, which is pretty much what they're designed. I think they're the OE tyre for something like a Volkswagen Up or something like that. I'm sure they'd be absolutely perfect. But on this, I think they're just a little bit too hard. The only other thing as well with a plan like that is, and more than a few friends actually have suggested to me that, and I know I've just said that I'm sort of happy with VEP and that it passed the acid test of going to Wales, but there are a few people that have said to me, would you not be better off with a Mark II with power steering? And I do keep toying with the idea of having an 8-valve GTI. I would quite like a phase 2, a nice phase 2 8-valve GTI. And I think if I found a really, really nice one, and it would have to be, an exceptional, completely unmissable car, that's probably the only circumstances under which I think I would part with VEP at the moment. If I could find, a really sort of well sorted, no welding, no restoration, no painting needing to be done to it, 8-valve GTI, then yeah, maybe I might consider swapping. But I think for now, until a vehicle like that comes up on the horizon, I will be sticking with VEP. Why an 8-valve GTI, you say, rather than a 16? Well, really simple. I want to keep my licence, to be honest with you. My dad had a 16-valve, or a valver, as he referred to it, and he's also a biker, so basically had no sense of fear whatsoever. I think about it, heard similar stories from Ian. I think he said that his 16-valve was just roaring everywhere in left, right and centre. I also think the 8-valve is perhaps a little bit overlooked these days. I'll tell you, the ideal 8-valve GTI for me would probably be a late model Hurricane. I remember them in like a dark metallic green with a matching green interior. How many of them there are left? Or at least how many of them are left in sort of a roadworthy or not needing massive restoration condition, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure I would have an absolute whale of a time with a 16-valve, but I'm not sure I need a car that quick. I'd still like to drive one, don't get me wrong. I think the 8-valve is perhaps also maybe a little bit easier to work on. Yeah, I do wonder whether a 16-valve would be a little bit too much of a handful for me. I mean, to be honest with you, this with 92 brake horsepower is still pretty swift. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not going to burn off any hot hatch, and most of my Volvos would sort of muller it in a straight line. But you know something? Through the twisties, this is brilliant. But I'll tell you where you really do notice how good this suspension is, and that's when I look back at my dash cam footage, particularly when it's sped up, because when it's sped up out of one of the two Volvos I've got out here, and you watch the horizon, you sort of see it bobbling around all over the place, whereas this is like watching a GoPro on hypersmooth. You can see how the BX's suspension just takes all those sort of peaks and sort of troughs and ups and downs. Yeah, takes all those ups and downs out of it, and you just wind up with this sort of gliding footage. It's really quite remarkable. And like I say, on the right road, it is just absolutely lovely. The only other thing I would say with it is I have had the perception that the front end on this car is a little bit stiff, and I think that is coming down to lack of use, because I usually find the more I drive it on a journey, the better it rides, the more compliant the front end becomes. But I don't think them sitting around does them that much good, to be honest with you. It certainly eases off and gets nicer the further it's been driven. So that's probably a sign that VEP should spend slightly less time tucked up in the garage and a little bit more time out and about on the road, which I do hope to do before the end of the year. Speaking of VEP and other places you may see VEP, one event that I have got booked, which you'll almost definitely see VEP for, unless we have some form of unforeseen hydraulic issue or mechanical issue, will be Festival of the Unexceptional in July. I took VEP last year, certainly intend to take VEP this year, and hopefully that trip won't be quite as stressful as the last one, because I think when I took VEP last year I'd got a wheel bearing on the way out, which we hadn't at that point identified which one it was. But yes, VEP will hopefully be at Festival of the Unexceptional. I did think about taking the £500 XC90, to be honest with you, because it is just about old enough, I think, quite frighteningly, to qualify. But I'm sure most of you would much rather see this than a ratty old Volvo XC90. So yeah, that's the plan for that. I don't know where else I'm going to take VEP this year. Obviously I missed French Car Day at the Great British Car Journey to do Wheels for Wales. But yeah, keep your eyes open, and obviously if you follow me on Threads or Blue Sky, we will not talk about the other place of evil. Keep your eye open there, because I may post anywhere else that I'm thinking of taking VEP to. Anyway, I think I have rambled on quite enough in this video. I'm going to go inside and make myself a cup of tea and have a bit of a chill and try and edit what is no doubt an absolute mess of randomness together. So I just want to wrap this up by saying thank you very much for watching. Please do consider subscribing before you go. I've got the goal I would like this year, before the end of this year, to hit 2,000 subscribers. I think I'm on around 1,500 at the moment, so if I could get to 2,000, that would be quite nice. It costs you nothing to subscribe at all to the channel. I don't do any memberships or anything like that. I don't do any merch because I'm too busy, quite frankly, advertising other people's channels. You usually do see me in either some Hubnut merch or some Whiteland Restorations merch at any given point in time. But yeah, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Please do consider subscribing before you go, and I will see you in a future one where hopefully, well, I have no idea what I'll be doing, so you'll have to see, won't you? Cheerio!